Hiya, it's me Anya back again on my Makeup and Metaphors channel. Thank you so much for clicking on another video. Today we're going to be talking about the much awaited conspiracy theories behind the famous writer Shakespeare. This was something that I was really interested in, and I hope that you will like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think of the video, let me know if you've read any of his plays, did you study at university, what did you think, did you hate him, did you love him, what have you seen live? I want to know it all. As you can see, this is a much lighter look this week because we're kind of heroing my freckles that I've decided to make an appearance to match my brand new ginger hair. So, you know, read books, serve looks, let's get on with the video. Hello, welcome back to my actual face. Hand movements. Today we're going to talk about the conspiracy theories that I mentioned in my last video surrounding William Shakespeare, and I'm going to do a little bit of a lighter makeup look today because the freckles are out, they're proud, and I'm actually going to like them. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm also ginger now. That's a thing. I've been stripping my hair, I'm on a journey, okay, and I like this journey for me. It's working actually, it's doing okay. So today's going to be a much lighter look. We're not even going to use foundation. It's going to be, we're still going to contour, still going to do eyebrows, but we're going to do a liner and a nude lip just because it's summer and it's really warm. But you know, your girl's got skin issues, so we still need that coverage. So the first theory that I'm going to dive into is the theory that Shakespeare was actually illiterate, and illiterate means that he could not read or write, which, you know, is a bit of a reach, seeing as we've got all of these manuscripts that of his plays, but we'll get into that later and how that would have worked. But it's quite interesting because if also, you know, tally up how many times I say interesting. I said interesting so much in my last video. When I was watching it, I was like, is it interesting, Anya? But his parents, John and Mary Shakespeare, that we talked about last week, were both illiterate, could not read or write, and you'd think that his dad would be able to read and write, seeing as he was like in the local council. Maybe he had like a very basic, maybe he could read, but he definitely couldn't write because all documents that he had his name signed on, they were signed with a mark, which is something that is even done nowadays. Like if a person like isn't in good enough health to sign their name or is illiterate, they can just leave an X or like a certain mark that distinguishes their signature. So that's what he did. So now I'm just going to put some concealer under my eyes, under my dark circles. Again, we're going to go for a supernatural look today. I've done really full coverage cake makeup for the last 3 videos. So we're going to see if we can do more of a natural summer look. And freckles, like faux freckles, are really in. And I have them naturally from being out in the sun. In the winter, seriously, I'm so pale. There's not a single freckle on this face. I've got one beauty spot like over here that's there all year round. But apart from that, the freckles only come out in the summer. And I've not been this freckly in years because I've been doing a lot of my quarantine school work outside. So I'm just covering up some of the darkness and some of the imperfections. And people who believe that Shakespeare didn't write his plays, there's actually a name for them. They're called the anti-Stratfordians. So, or Stratfordians, if you remember me saying that Shakespeare was from Stratford. So now I'm just blending it out. I'm not trying to cover my whole face. So still very visible freckles. And there's some really famous people in history who were kind of anti-Stratfordians, who believed that Shakespeare wasn't the man behind the plays. People like Charlie Chaplin, Helen Keller, Mark Twain, all of those people were of the belief that there's no way that this lower class man could have produced such beautiful, masterful writing. So, along with his parents being illiterate, Shakespeare's children were illiterate as well. So, you might remember me talking about his twins, Hamnet and Judith. So, both of those could not write. I know Hamnet died at 11, but he couldn't write before then. Whereas Susanna, the eldest, there is documentation of her like scrawling a signature. So it wasn't particularly well done, but there is a sample of her doing writing. So at least we have some inclination that she might have been literate, but the others were not. So again, how could a man who both parents were illiterate and his children were illiterate, how come he was literate to such a level that he could produce the world's most famous plays and write in like iambic pentameter, you know, and be educated like by himself to such a high level? To kind of add to that argument that Shakespeare couldn't actually write is the fact that around 6 or 7 different versions of his signature could be found, which will then add to the theory that Shakespeare was a group of writers, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But he either couldn't spell his own name, or he used to have a lot of fun spelling it different ways. Sometimes it would be spelled like Shake hyphen spear, Shakespeare, Shakespeare, like even with an X, like SHAXPER, like Shakespeare. It could have just been him having fun, obviously, but I don't know. Also, I did a thing and shaved off my eyebrows again, so in case you're wondering why I'm putting concealer over them, it's because I'm going to be drawing on the ends maybe slightly higher just to give me that lifted look. Okay, so that's the end of the concealer. As you can see, I've just put it around my under eyes, here on my nose just because I get a little bit of redness there, and on my chin just because I have some old acne scarring on there, and just blended it down my neck so that it looks like kind of that no makeup look for summer. I'm going to do a little bit of cream contour now. Again, nowhere near what we did for the last few videos, just a little bit of a dark shade here is an ABH cream contour palette. I'm doing the majority of stuff with my fingers today because I want it to look super natural. Usually I would do all of this with a brush, but because I want it to look summery, natural, very blended with the skin, and the heat obviously of your fingers blends it in. I've watched so many videos on makeup and putting it on, and it's important to obviously work up and things like that. Don't be too harsh with your fingers while you're putting it on your skin. If you're doing this and dragging your face around, it will really encourage wrinkles to develop. They say to use this finger here, the ring finger, because it's very weak and when you tap things on, but I'm probably not doing that. No, I'm not. I can see I'm using my pointer. Wow. But so Shakespeare wrote in a style of writing called secretary writing. I suppose we kind of similar to shorthand today, like what journalists would use so that they could write very quickly. It would have like a lot of abbreviations in it, and as well it was known for having, like, everyone had their own individual style. If you're wondering what I'm looking at, by the way, my mirror is here. I'm not like randomly staring over having an existential crisis. But he had his own signs, or his own style of this secretary writing, and it was quite handy because basically it was practically indecipherable for people who weren't able to write in this style, and it could look very fancy as well. So I'm doing a line here, obviously I haven't blended it out yet, on my jawline because I'm just not quite blessed yet with a snatched jawline. So I'm going to draw on, I am going to blend it out. Can you imagine if it was that snatched? Would love that. But I'm just blending this out. I will blend everything out with a brush in a little bit just to like tidy it up. Something else that I found while I was doing a bit of research for this, though it's not particularly anything to do with conspiracy theories, is the actual meaning behind his name. So Shakes or Shacks basically means to hold or to brandish, and spear means like a spear. So it means to brandish a spear, and it's been associated with like being really argumentative. And if you look at his coat of arms, it is actually a falcon brandishing or holding a spear. I just thought that was interesting. I kind of went down a little rabbit hole when I was looking up about the different spellings of his name, and I was like, oh, I wonder what does that mean? And then, but anyway, now you know. Now I'm just gonna sharpen up some of the contour lines that I did. So in this kit here, you can see how used it is. I'm just going to go into the light again and quickly just kind of cut that contour so that it's sharp, like that, and then I'll just blend it in together because obviously you don't really want any harsh lines on your face, do ya? So for research purposes and also for the fact that I just love a good film, I watched Anonymous, which is a film based on the idea that Shakespeare did not write his plays, and I assumed that it was going to be a load of rubbish, as some of the reviews on it were basically talking about how rubbish it was and how ridiculous it was, and I was expecting something akin to like The Room, but it's actually pretty good. like I really enjoyed it. I got sucked in, and I'm not gonna lie, it kind of persuaded me a little bit until then I went back and did some more research and found out that it actually is basically impossible for what they say. They based their whole concept that Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, wrote these plays, but there's no way that he could have put his own name to them because he was raised in like a Puritan background and like obviously a nobleman. There was no way that he could have associated himself with like the base people who were part of the theatre, you know, part of the mob, part of the groundlings, the actors. So basically he hid under the pen name Shakespeare. Shakespeare in this movie is portrayed as like manipulative, sly, a social climber, like a clout chaser, basically everything really, really bad. And I hated Shakespeare in this film, but that's just because I don't like the actor. Pretty sure it's the same actor that played like one of the detectives in Hot Fuzz, and I hated him in that too.
Because we all sell apples round here, don't we?
Your dad sells apples, Andy.
And raspberries.
But he did a good job in like turning me against Shakespeare for a little bit, and I loved Edward de Vere. And but again, when I actually went into the research, there was a really good article on The Guardian, which basically went through bit by bit how Anonymous was like historically incorrect, and I'm glad I read that because I probably would have been questioning Shakespeare if I had not. So I'll link that in the down below, in the description below. I better get back to doing actual makeup, right? So I'm gonna set the makeup now. Obviously I don't have my RCMA powder today. I'm just gonna use this Revolution Bacon Finish. I'm gonna use a very small amount. I'm not even gonna pour it out. I'm just gonna go in and just set under my eyes. I'm gonna pat it out to make sure there's no small creasing there, on top of my eyelids as well. See, I accidentally baked on top of a crease there, and now there's a line in it. But it doesn't really matter because I'm going to put some light eyeshadow on. So I'm just going to set this in place. I'm not going to set the contour too much, like the dark contour too much, because I'm going to be putting bronzer over that. So I'm just kind of basically setting where I put the concealer with the translucent powder. One thing that anti-Stratfordians believe, so the people who believe that there's no way that Shakespeare could have done this, is they're very classist in my opinion. You know, the idea that there's no way that this normal boy from Stratford could have produced such texts, and they do argue and say that they're not classist, that they're just realists, but I think that anybody could have, you know, like that anyone can be born with exceptional talents. You don't have to be of upper class in order to be able to write something like this. Right, let's contour. One thing that was really good about the film though was being able to see their depiction of like Tudor London and what the Globe looked like and how the Globe was built. Obviously how they gave the backstory on how the Globe was built was completely wrong. You know, they said that basically Shakespeare went to Edward de Vere and like blackmailed him into giving him money to open the Globe. Also they said that like Queen Elizabeth I had like incestual relationships even though she's known as the Virgin Queen. Like they basically just rewrote history to fit their own narrative. But you know, it sucked me in for a little bit. I was kind of believing it for a while. I was thinking, yeah, what if he was illiterate? How could he write? So they also believe that because there's no documentation of him going to a good school. So we said that it was believed that he had gone to the local grammar school, but there isn't actually any documentation of it. He mightn't have gone to school at all, and they're kind of relying on that. So I'm putting on some bronzer now just to bronze up the outskirts of my face, similar to where you put the contour. So the contour is cool tone to create shadow. Bronzer is warm tone to give you the kind of sun-kissed look. I bring bronzer all across my cheeks and on my nose just because it makes it look slightly more realistic, and I just powder it everywhere because the sun, obviously it hits the high points of your face first and then it will hit everywhere else. At first I didn't really see the point in contouring and bronzing, but it is actually important. So the whole idea of conspiracy theories behind Shakespeare come from a book that was published about 90 years ago. And the author of this, his name is J.T. Looney, which in itself might hint at his idea and how credible it is, but it was called Shakespeare Identified. And it had quite a lot of traction at the time. It has a bit of a cult following. And setting spray. I don't know where my fan is. We're just going to have to be like peasants and let it dry naturally. Other authors that have been believed to have been really behind the scripts were Sir Francis Bacon and Christopher Marlowe. So they're just some of the other names. There's been loads. I think there's been like 80 names that have been put into like distribution as to who could have really written these plays. Like they just really don't want Shakespeare to get the glory for these plays. So I'm going to talk about Shakespeare's will again and the conspiracy behind that. So if you remember from my last video, I said that Shakespeare in his will left something a little bit confusing to his wife, and that was his second best bed. But we said that actually that might have been a bit romantic, and because that would have been their marital bed. But one thing that was not mentioned in Shakespeare's will was any of his plays, any of his writing, like who got the manuscripts, who got anything to do with his life basically as a playwright. I believe that his actors, like his acting group, were mentioned in the play, but apart from that, nothing. Like nobody could basically own his manuscripts, anything like that. So again, maybe he wasn't the actual owner of them. Maybe he was just, they were just using his name as a guise. So what is your favorite Shakespeare play? Or do you love Shakespeare? Do you hate Shakespeare? I only started learning Shakespeare when I was doing my Leaving Cert in Ireland. So the Leaving Cert it's not quite the GCSE. The whole exam system in Ireland is completely different to England. In England, you've got your GCSEs and then you've got your A-levels, but not everyone has to do their A-levels, whereas in Ireland, you've got a junior cert and a Leaving Cert, and you basically have to sit both. There's no option to just leave school at 15. And that's probably good, because I definitely would have left school at 15 if I was given the choice. But for my Leaving Cert, we did King Lear, and I remember we went to go see it live in Galway, and it was unbelievable. I remember we were really close. We were like upstairs in the gallery at the side. We could see everything, and there's this one scene where an eye gets ripped out, and I remember the actor shouting, "Out, vile jelly," and he ripped the eye out. I think it was the Earl of Gloucester. And he rips the eye out, and he squished it in his hand. It was like a Halloween eye candy, squished it in his hand and threw it into the audience, and it was so effective. But it's definitely one of my favourite plays of all time, King Lear and The Tempest. Okay, so that's the eyebrows done. Next we're going to move on to the eyes, and I'm going to talk briefly about my last little bit of my conspiracy theory. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little dusting of a light base colour across my eye and under it, just again to brighten it up slightly more. I've got a little cheat for you today on how to do liquid eyeliner when you're not great at it. And it's something I bought ages ago from Amazon or even Wish, and it's a stamp, and it's actually really, really good. So if you're not in the mood for doing liquid liner, you can just get this. I just use the side of like a felt tip liner here. I put on a lot because it will dry out, and then by the time you line it up with your eye and everything, you still want it to be wet enough to have that outline for you. And then obviously you can place it how you want. I'm going to place it kind of up and out. Line that up. Do that. Yeah, there we go. Already worked. I'm just going to clean that up now. Make it slightly sharper. And done. Yes, my final conspiracy theory. Is that one a little bit higher than that one? No, actually, I think they're quite even. Right, so my last little bit, after covering about his will and not putting anything in there about his writing, is the idea that there's absolutely no evidence that Shakespeare travelled anywhere in his life. So how is he able to talk in such depth and detail about all of these foreign lands? Like, he set loads of his plays in different countries, but a nobleman or somebody who was like in the monarchy would have traveled to lots of different places and would have had like intimate knowledge of, are they even? I don't think so. I'll have to fix it. Let's see, make this one slightly higher. Oh yeah, that's better. Once I put lashes on, it might cover it. And that again just plays into the idea of, while the idea of Edward de Vere is very forthcoming, and like he would have traveled to all these places and he would have seen all of these different things. One of the, I suppose, bits of evidence that this conspiracy theory is just complete rubbish is the fact that he died before 10 of Shakespeare's plays were even written and published. So unless he was writing really quickly in his life and wanted them published posthumously. Do you ever have a word that you've read and you've never said it out loud? Posthumously.
Posthumously.
After he was dead. And then I mentioned earlier the idea that there was a group of writers that was behind it. That's another theory, that like no one person would have been able to have such an in-depth knowledge of all of these different areas, all of these ways of life, especially the points of views of women, because at that time, obviously, women's role was at home in the house, the homemaker, the wife, like looking after the children and cooking. Basically, women in Shakespeare's plays were actually very clever, very educated. So this would have been quite new. Obviously, to kind of just itchy nose, you know, to juxtapose that idea, fancy word alert, is that obviously the women didn't actually get to play the women in Shakespeare's plays. They were played by men because women weren't allowed to act. But the women, in fairness, were portrayed as quite clever. A lot of the times they were even the hero, or they could be the villain, you know, they had main roles in these plays. Right, I'll be right back with some lashes. Okie dokie, so that's my lashes on. Well, you can just see a little bit of lash glue there just while it's drying, but it will dry transparent. These are just the GWA Girls with Attitude lashes from Primark, and they're actually so good. I don't really like the all one length lashes that you can literally see the way all across like a shine. And these are kind of spaced out and a little bit more wispy. Obviously they look fake, no lashes are this long, but I just prefer them. I think they're like £2 or something ridiculous. And all I'm going to do now is line my lips, not too harshly, blend that in, and then a little bit of gloss. So let me know, did you know any of this stuff behind Shakespeare? Did you know that there was this movement, this anti-Stratfordian movement, about how there's no way that he could have wrote it? I feel sorry for any descendants of Shakespeare. I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that his lineage ended, like his direct lineage, because obviously Hamlet was his son, and I think I read that his direct lineage is basically gone, but I'm sure there is other descendants of Shakespeare. And it must be quite frustrating to hear that such a talented man is basically being denied the acclaim that he deserves. And until there is a direct link between someone like Edward de Vere, Christopher Marlowe, or Sir Francis Bacon, then I'm going to stick with the idea that Shakespeare actually wrote Shakespeare's plays. So I hope that you learned something today. I hope that you enjoyed this look. It's much more kind of light than what I usually do. You can still see my freckles. I'll see if I can turn this light down a little bit because it's glaring. But if I turn this down, you can see that my freckles are still very much on display. And yeah, go for it. Tag me in it, Makeup and Metaphors. Read books, serve looks, like, comment and subscribe. I am going to be doing a giveaway when I reach 500 subscribers for the UK and Ireland. Right now the majority of my subscribers are from the USA, which is awesome, but I don't think I can quite afford postage to the USA yet. Maybe when I reach 1,000 subscribers it'll be open worldwide. But come on, Ireland and the UK, start following, start learning, start reading books and serving makeup looks. Alright, see you next... I just cracked my fingers, why did I do that? See you next Sunday. Bye! I need to stop drinking cream soda, Jim, because I'm burping all the time.